across to the newsroom now and speak to Hannah White from the Institute for Government, who's in our newsroom for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Hannah. I'm glad you're in the warm and dry on this rather wet May day. Just talk us through what we are likely to see now should the Prime Minister make the announcement that people are expecting. And I have to stress, we don't still quite know, but what would be the protocol?
So what we would expect is the Prime Minister to come out in maybe the next few minutes, the next hour or so, and make an announcement to say that he either has already spoken to the King or he's planning to go to the palace to ask for a dissolution of Parliament in order to hold a general election. Normally what would happen is Parliament would continue to sit for a few days in order to deal with the legislation which is currently going through the House. There's still 16 government bills, which obviously in an ideal world the government would like to see become law, and so there'll be what's called a wash-up, where they talk to the opposition parties and try to speed some of that legislation onto the statute book. Then the expectation would be that if you had a election, people are saying that would be on the 4th of July, then you would need to have dissolved Parliament by Thursday next week. At that point, all MPs cease to become MPs. They've just become candidates standing for election, and we will be into the general election campaign.
And just to explain, Hannah, why is it the 4th of July that people are talking about?
I think people are talking about the 4th of July just on the basis of when the announcement is being made, the fact that you will need a few days for wash-up for Parliament to conclude its business. And the fact is that if you factor in Thursday next week as being the last day on which Parliament might sit, it's 25 days for an election campaign, 25 working days before the election would then be held. And I think the reasoning people are thinking of is that would be before at least English schools break up for the holidays, although not Scottish schools. They will already finish for the summer. But there are obviously lots of different calculations that go into picking an election date, as Chris has been saying.
And Hannah, I don't know if you had an opportunity to listen to Chris Mason, our political editor, who was saying that he listens to people, he reads the runes, and he often dismisses speculation of election talk. But it's simply that people have been responding differently in the last few hours, particularly amongst the civil service. What would change in a civil servant's behaviour if there's an expectation of a general election?
Well, of course, the civil service has to be very careful when they actually get into an election campaign to make sure that nothing they do can be perceived as working on behalf of the government at that point in order to promote the government's interests, because government MPs just become candidates for election at that point. But I think what Chris will have been referring to is examples of meetings being cancelled, some ministers seeming to cut short their international travel. And really, for me, the persuasive thing has been the absence of denial, because we all have examples, and Gordon Brown is the famous one, of prime ministers who allowed speculation about an election being called to run riot, and then didn't call an election. And I think prime ministers are now very cognizant of the fact that they need to shut down that sort of speculation quickly if they're not going to call an election. And we haven't had. Rishi Sunak had a prime opportunity to do that at Prime Minister's questions today, and he answered in a way which did not shut down the speculation.
Yes, indeed, and that was sort of resounding in its silence, wasn't it? Hannah, thank you very much indeed.